Okay, welcome to Angel Wing podcast and the participant perspective area of the Angel Wing LLC. The Angel Wing LLC has been founded by Dr. CHETANA KRIPALU as an ongoing attempt to promote three basic principles of self-mastery, personal transformation, human upliftment, and many other related ideas along those lines. Today we have Mr. Pratap Bhatt, who will be giving his perspective on these questions as well as many others. Before we get into that, I would just like to request Mr. Bhatt to give some introductions, his background. So if you can give your background, your interest in personal development, spirituality, transformational processes, and your journey, how you came into this journey, if you can give some background on that, that would be great, including your educational background.
Yeah. My educational background is that I have a master's degree in industrial engineering and also MBA from the USA here. And my background includes the most important aspect of my life, but especially after I retired from work now, is that the pursuit of spirituality. And I was so much interested in finding out who I am. And it all started with self-realization fellowship that was established by Paramahansa Yoganandaji in the USA. And when I was traveling to LA, I came across his meditation techniques and all that. And that really drew me into the spirituality. That was the beginning my life in the spirituality. And then all of a sudden, I also came across Krishnamurti's teaching, which influenced even more and brought this Vedantic aspect of with the meditation. So in that way, you know, the importance of understanding Vedanta. At that time, Krishnamurti was speaking without any of these traditions. He never used the word even Vedanta or God or consciousness or anything. But it was somehow ringing the bell of truth with me, even though there was not that much understanding at that time. But then slowly I came across various other teachers also taught me, like Swamis of Gurukulam in Pennsylvania that I used to go, and particularly Swami Dayanandaji, who established this teaching of Advaita Vedanta in USA in various parts of the country. And I used to attend these lectures and really understood that there is so much similarity in what Swami Dayanandaji is teaching Advaita Vedanta and what Krishnamurti was telling us. And as I understood Krishnamurti more after going to this Gurukulam. And then after that, I came across a Western teacher, Francis, whose name is Francis, who also was talking about Vedanta, came from the tradition back in India. He never went to India, but he came across this teaching through his teacher who had the guru in India, in the lineage of Shankaracharya and Gaudapada. So then I got interested in that even more. That strengthened my understanding. And then I consider Francis as the most influential person in my life. And lots of understanding came through his teaching. And that made so much sense in Krishnamurti's teaching and in Dayananda's our tradition, Advaita Vedanta also. So that's how my life began in the last 15, 20 years.
Okay, yes, thank you for sharing that beautiful background. So to begin our exposition on this, and particularly your exposition, my first question to you is with regards to the human condition. When we consider right now we have over 7 billion people on the planet, not to mention all the other animals and plants and all the other life that's there. Humanity continues to be in a state of conflict. All the time, at any point, there's always some conflict at some level. It almost seems like it's just status quo. What is your understanding of conflict? What is conflict to begin with? So as we move into the angel wing foundational ideas, try to get to some background first, and then we'll move into those foundational ideas and get your perspective on those ideas. And then we'll also get into Vedanta and Krishnamurti and Francis Lucille and other things. We'll get into all of that because this is an opportunity for you. It's an opportunity for us, actually. It's a blessing for the whole world to have your wisdom be completely recorded as much as possible and as much depth as possible because you are a very evolved being and you have great interest in this, great study and practice in this entire path also. So we will look at this from multiple angles. So please talk openly, freely, as long as you want. There is no restriction of any kind. This is your vision, your perspective, your take on things. So to begin with a tremendous amount of respect to you and your background.
Thank you so much.
Oh no, absolutely. What is your perspective on conflict? What is conflict?
Conflict to me is that when there are two, then that two, for example, two person, when they think that they are independently existing entities, then there is a possibility of conflict arising because you think one way and the other person thinks a different way. And he may say that your idea is not correct, and I may say that your idea is not correct. All those things leads into the conflict. That's the base. And the base of the conflict, even when we see that the conflict arises in our mind, but it's always our mind has some other people, thoughts and images versus our images. And the conflict is always within one's mind between his image or her image as a central, and the other people around the person also are in the same mind, and their thoughts and this person's thought are always in conflict. And that's the root cause of all our problem. Since the mankind step on this earth, the individuality that we take it as a real and not inquire, is it really true? That means we take ourselves as a real, not others, separate from the others totally. Then only there is a chance of conflict, and as a result of conflict, suffering also happens, that we take it as a happening to us.
All right, that's fine. So
root cause.
Right. So would you say that human suffering is the result of lack of this realization that each human being as an individual is still functioning as an individual, but there is also a sense of oneness? So what is that relationship between the individual and that oneness?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And after so many years of this Advaita teaching, I can tell you that the individuality is not very hard to understand, that each of us, when we grow up, we are conditioned, our minds conditioned to think in a certain way only, depending on the place and the times in which we are born. So based on that, there is an environment that in which we are growing up, and all the value systems and opinion and our beliefs and all those things are stored in the mind as a memory. And that's the fundamental thing that that makes us an individual person. So person or personhood is really the content of the mind that that is taken as a real me. I take myself based on identification with the mind. I, meaning the real I, is taking consciousness, is taking this content of this mind, and a sense of Pratap arises out of that, so that Pratap or Sachin can speak the mind. That's the purpose that sense arises. So, and that sense says that I am only this mind-based person. So that's the definition of a person to me. Is this person or an individual is nothing but a sense of me arising by identification with the content of the mind, and then taking that I as a real I. Now, if it arises based on the mind, then it has to be a thought. So for example, Pratap is nothing but a thought of Pratap, that I take it as a real, and that's the individualism, or the person or individual, whatever you want to call. That's versus if we inquire really, then we can find this I that I take a real is nothing but just the instrument of speaking our mind. Because when somebody asks the question, I cannot answer. I mean, the mind cannot answer. So this is the intelligence that has designed the sense of I, so that the mind can be spoken. Okay, so that's the spokesperson kind of a thing in the mind. But it's taken as such a real thing throughout our life in the absence of inquiry. And when we inquire, right now, I'll tell you, when we inquire who is this Pratap, then we can find that the thought cannot be me, because it comes and goes. That which is permanent has to be the real self. And that's what we find out by inquiring this personhood, this individual, I think. And we will find that there is no tangible proof that we are this I, because it's a thought taken real. So that's how, when you inquire, you find in experience that it is the consciousness itself that is the reality of all of us. Share that one consciousness. Now that first glimpse comes when we inquire, and I will not go detail right now, but when we inquire, we find that at the reality of my mind and my body and soul's entire existence is consciousness, or Atman, we call it, or even God, it doesn't matter what we call. The important is that it's a reality of the body-mind based individuals, or even a separate existence. The reality is all one universal consciousness, and that's a oneness. At that level, we are all one. Really, we are all one, and yet we don't realize that. So the problem of this, as we related, that all problem starts with taking us separate from the rest of the existence.
Yes, thank you for those wonderful ideas. Human beings, as they are, we certainly do see interconnection. I mean, there's no doubt. We can probably more easily see interconnection than oneness. Interconnection is all around us, everywhere. In your study of Vedanta, in your study of J. Krishnamurti and others, why is there even the experience of identification? You know, identification, Dr. Chetana has mentioned this in her initial talks on the self-mastery audio. She's talked about identification. Why is there identification? I mean, and why is there even the appearance of the many? This is a big question in Vedanta, that there's only one. Vedanta and Advaita says there's one, that there's no two actually. Advaita means one without a second. Then the many that is there, what is that? Where did that come from? How is that explained?
You mean the individuality, different person, different objects?
Yes, all the differentiation of names and forms and everything, nam, rup, akar, as we say, the name, form, and the plurality. Why is that even there? Or what?
Yeah, because what happens is that this plurality exists in the mind because this consciousness as universal intelligence has created the mind so that when we see an object, any object that we see or experience rather, then that object has to be named. Empirically, it is given a name, and then it gets stored in the mind as a memory in order for us to function this life. Because every time we don't have to say, oh, I am aware of it only. And that the separation happens for a purpose of individual objects. And that is main thing is that it is named and it's stored in the mind as memory. And that's what we really look at it instead of, see, outside world don't have the duality or it has only oneness. Why? Because nothing outside tells that it is different than other object next to it. Okay? Every object have no say anything what they are. So that means they are all one, and that oneness is experienced outside world is experienced only as an isness. Isness. Everything is before the mind steps in and puts it in the memory and then takes it as a real. So all these seemingly different objects are in the mind, and that we don't inquire and we take our mind as real. I mean, mind in the sense that the mind-based sense as real, who is always answering and looking at the level of the mind only. All experiences at the mind, it stops. It never goes further. It never inquires even the outside world being one. As a isness, which we call the sat. And out of this isness, all this nama rupa arise as a separate by the consciousness. When we are aware, but the consciousness manifests them as different object in the sense that the mind then holds it. Because after all, the most important teaching of Advaita Vedanta is to be able to live in the world of duality, in the world of diversity. And each diversity in itself is nothing but the unity, underneath it, unity. So it's not like bodies and the minds have to be same, then only there is a oneness. No, it's only consciousness. It's worked like a system where each individual on an assembly line does its own job, whatever it has to do. For example, the best example I can give is the assembly line workers, who each one is doing some work, only that much, and then hand over to the next one, to the next one. The whole thing together is oneness. At the end, the car comes out because of this oneness, everybody added. So seeming duality is not a problem as long as we understand that these are the practical use of the mind so that each object can be used in a proper way, including, yeah.
Yes, that's quite beautiful. Now, you talked about inquiry. So let's see if we can now open this up very carefully. When we consider inquiry, that would mean to probe, to try to understand, to inquire, to know. What is this path of inquiry? Because in Angel Wing, we talk about self-mastery. Now, we'll get to that a little bit later, but what is your understanding, your even your experience, if you want to share, on inquiry. What is inquiry actually?
Inquiry is the very fundamental approach of the Advaita Vedanta as I know it. And it's more of a direct path than the traditional way of reaching there through all these yama, niyama, and all those steps. So inquiry is very powerful thing. If we say, who am I, for example, because that's the most important question that one can ask in one's life is that who am really I? Is this name Pratap me really? This body mind are real? Then you can ask this question, and as a result of asking this question, if the mind doesn't interfere with mind's answers, which are all objective answers. So these objective answers are all limited in themselves, right? An object can only be that object and nothing else. So if I hold on to this and just ask the question without answering from the mind, then it's a very good chance that the first insight will come, which says that, can I even ask the question, who am I, without first being, without first existing, without first knowing that I am for sure, right? Because I can only ask if I am. I just don't know who I am, but I know one thing, that I am for sure. So what am I actually gives me the insight that I am for sure. So that's a big thing in that. And the other thing that I can expand later on, that where we go from I am, because anything that we add from the mind is I am Pratap, I am father, I am mother, I am this, I am that, I'm engineer. That limits this I am. In front of we put I am, and then we put an object. So I become the object and they're limited. So that cannot be me. That will be another inside. And then at one point we will say that if I know all these objects, then I cannot be the object. I have to be of necessity subject, which is the approach of neti in the traditional way that they say, not this, not this, not this. So anything you know with the mind cannot be me, cannot be real I, in other words. I am the subject. Now this at least tells us that I am nothing of the thing that I know with my mind. So there is a freedom there to inquire who is the real subject. And even if we don't inquire who is the real subject and just simply live in not knowing, but at least know that what I am not, that will also take us to the path of real freedom or moksha or whatever you can say.
So
these are a short way of explaining the.
Yes, and you can elaborate. You can go longer if you want. There's a limit here, so you can speak as long as you want. There's a quote from someone who stated that freedom is the freedom of one's idea of oneself. Freedom is the freedom of. It's like the freedom from one's idea of oneself. You know, what we think we are to be free of that thought, who I think I am.
Yeah.
What do you say about this?
That's a very good question. The final freedom, the real freedom is to be free in spite of this separate I or ego. In spite of that I consider myself only as an individual. So freedom from individuality to me is the true freedom. And it doesn't have to eliminate this I at all. Even if there is an I, one can rise above this, the idea about myself. All ideas about myself becomes one individual, right? All ideas that I have, I identify with it. I meaning the consciousness identify with it, and then it considers as itself being that, the one who has the idea. See, all there are ideas, but then it generates an I because of the identification. And it said, this I has this idea, which is so like a two thoughts are in duality, one taken real. So this is the thing that really made my understanding even stronger to see this path of inquiry leading into this very good, convincing way, experience-based convincing that is the problem that we all are.
Yes, and as
we have to be free from that. In other words,
yes.
To answer your question, that's
right.
The only thing that we require to be free.
Yes, yes, definitely. So most human beings are stuck in conditioning. You know, J. Krishnamurti talks a lot about conditioning, and so many other teachers talk about it. We've talked about it also. The conditioning is part of just our makeup. It's part of our framework. It's there.
Right.
The question of conflict, and then that state beyond duality, in a more general sense, beyond the divisiveness, because there's divisiveness all around, but there's also diversity. So it seems to me that there can be a great deal of cherishing diversity without conflict. There can be acceptance of diversity by perceiving the underlying unity, the underlying oneness amidst that diversity. What is your take on how that is accomplished? You know, because we hear this a lot: unity within diversity. That there's a diverse world. There's so many different approaches, opinions, but there's an underlying unity. Okay, assume that there is. So, what is needed to realize that underlying unity while cherishing the diversity?
Yes, that's a very, very good question. And that's the most important thing, as I have learned, the use or the application of this Advaita teaching in the dual world, the diverse world. That's the most important thing. And for that, you have to see that this I that I am telling myself is only a mind-based sense of Pratap. So that mind-based, anything that is mind-based entity is always a thought, right? So mind in itself with so many diverse knowledge is no problem. In itself is not a mind, nor a body's problem. Problem is that this, out of this identification, the thought of myself is taken as a real. If you don't take as a real, it's not a problem, because it's supposed to be identified and use it, but with the total understanding that this I is not a real I, but it's a tool to use this body and the mind in the diverse world. So the diverse world, now that we know the truth, like I learned so much from Krishnamurti, that when you see false as the false, that itself is the truth. There is no other truth. When you see something false as the false, in other words, this I, which is really a thought for wielding this body and the mind in the diversity properly, to take care of this particular body and the mind and other people, because at the level of this consciousness, we are only one reality. But somehow there is a mind, when consciousness reflects in the mind, it's like some image happens there, and that image is taken as a real by identification. So this when you know that this is really not real, it's required, it's necessary, because it's the intelligence that has done it. So that entity is what we call in the traditional Vedanta is a Chidabhas. Bhas, abhas. Abhas means some feeling that I am this reflection and not know the real consciousness. So when you know for sure that this is truth, is that this is only our tool and not the reality, a separate reality. If there is a separate reality, see how unexplainable it is when you say that I am born out of the mind as Pratap. It's a sense of Pratap. And then this Pratap, which is a thought, is trying to control the mind. How can it be possible? So that means, again, the Krishnamurti helped me there also. He's saying this mind is a real observer. Instead of that, we are robbing this, we are usurping this mind's being an observer to us. To separate I is an observer. And we take mind as an observer. So this is the thing that he said, that the observer and the observed are the same thing. Both are this observed or observer, whatever you call, but it's not true. And then we are creating the artificial duality between me taking real and then try to manipulate the mind or anything. That is to be seen in order for us to live automatically in diversity. Because seeing the truth, again, the seeing the truth is not something that you see, but false as the false will give you this truth. And then this understanding itself will act through the mind and the body. Because now that the mind has understood, it's open. Open in the sense this I has understood its role being an instrument to take care of this body and the other body. And that's how we share. See, functional part of the knowledge, when we identify with it, is never a problem. I have never a problem by saying that I'm an engineer in the practical diverse world. Only problem is that we take it as a real. So that's how I deal with the diversity, with this convincing experiential understanding. It's understanding only. It's nothing something that you have to do.
Okay, so I have a question for you. So the functional interaction in the diversity, right? We've talked about this in our dialogues also, but let's see, probe it a little bit in more depth here. The functionality of interaction has to be there. There has to be. I mean, there's
no option.
There's no question about that.
Even all the realized people like Ramana Maharshi and Ramakrishna Paramahansa, they all lived in the dual world, right?
Yes, exactly. So
and when you say Ramakrishna Paramahansa, only he will answer.
Yes, exactly. So there is a name and a form. There's just not the identification with it beyond the functionality.
Beyond. Very good. Yeah.
Right. So the identification with the contents of the psychological me is only to the extent of a functional relationship. So there really is no identification. It's like a garb. It's like you're putting on a shirt, you put this on, okay, this is my shirt. I put it on because you have to cover the body, but you take it off, you can take it off anytime. Yeah. So that functional sense of the me is put on and then it's put on the side, but there's no dwelling on that also.
But even if it is identification is real for identification, it happens for the psychological part. For example, I have so many beliefs. I'm Indian, I'm this and I'm that, and all those psychological things, opinions, beliefs, everything. They are only incidental. As long as we know it's not a real me, then even that also is okay.
Yes. So this is very beautiful, because that is a state of living liberation. In the sense,
beautiful, living liberation.
Living
Jivan
liberation.
Mukta.
Jivan Mukta, right? Exactly. That is the Sanskrit term. So the Jivan Mukta, if we were to put that in another language as living liberation, or we can also use the expression self-mastery. So,
Yes.
so self-mastery to me, I'll share with you some of my thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Self-mastery to me is being able to maneuver through the world of names and forms and people and places and things, to maneuver through it masterfully without entanglement. There's no entanglement inside there, but there's also no condemnation of the experience, nor is there running after the experience. And that is a masterful interaction. What do you say about this?
Very good. I think you said it very correctly, that it's an interaction which has no entanglement. In other words, you deal with each object. I mean, everybody will be the object, really.
Yeah.
So you deal with the object in the right way. For example, all the people that in our life, you have a spouse, you behave like a spouse, sister like a sister, and father like a father, mother like a mother. So, and other person in the world, like so people like Hitler created so much thing, while Gandhi created so many. All those things you deal with appropriately with them, also with this understanding. You don't have to try to deal. It comes because you saw the falsity of this separate I. There cannot be two I. One I, which is really awareness or consciousness or Atman or whatever name you give, that just is a witness, and there is no identification when it is truly a witnessing. So when you see that very clearly, that part, that it's a witness only, the identification comes only when it's needed.
Right. Okay. So there is a statement that we have talked about before, and I think maybe J. Krishnamurti has stated this somewhere, that our minds, let's say, a mind must be capable of standing alone. I'm sorry, let me say that again. A mind must be capable of standing alone, of being a light to itself. So I want to ask you about this based on our conversation so far, and it's a beautiful statements you have made, very, very enlightening, that we have a mind, obviously, we have mind, it's there. Now, its capacity to stand alone needs to develop. The human mind, the way it is now, it is not standing alone. It is filled with ideas, concepts, theories, beliefs, opinions, conditionings, all kinds of clutter is there that is causing conflict, division, hatred, violence. It's causing so much damage, energy damage. It's causing problems across the board. So what you're suggesting, if I understand you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what you're suggesting, Mr. Bhatt, is that an individual must get to that point through inquiry of being able to stand alone, to be in a state of aloneness and be a light to itself. The mind becomes a light to itself. What do you say about that?
Yeah, those statements, in my way of understanding, if I were to put this, that mind stand alone, that kind of thing to me says that I see myself as this consciousness, which is a universal consciousness. And that means everything is just only I. This I, everything. I, consciousness, is everything, and it's me also, I. I is a consciousness telling itself, I am everything. So standing alone means everything is me. All there is consciousness. All there is I only, the true I, which is not mind-based. The true I says everything is me. So that is standing alone, in spite of all the varieties. See, what our problem happens is that we always take the diversity in the mind as a real. We never rise above the mind to inquire.
Yes,
so
yes.
Standing alone is that everything is you, everything is God, for example. That is, and it's a light. Mind itself is a light to itself.
It's a light to itself. So that diversity that you were just speaking of, the diversity is experienced through the senses. Obviously, that's how we see it all. We hear, see, taste, and then we think about it. The diversity is a fact of life. It's just there. But interestingly, that diversity does not have to be a contaminant in the mind, or for that diversity to contaminate the purity, the clarity of the mind. I'm just kind of reflecting on this, reflecting on what you're saying, and we can kind of go back and forth a little bit on this. So there's another statement by J. Krishnamurti. He stated that there is a difference between isolation and aloneness, between loneliness and being able to stand by yourself clearly, unconfused, uncontaminated. So on the one hand, people feel isolated and alone, and they feel lonely, and they're just caught up in that very unpleasant state. But aloneness is a whole different matter. Being able to stand by yourself clearly, without confusion, without contamination. And he also mentions here that the process of investigation and inquiry is something that is needed to get to that state of uncontaminated observation, not meditation as an escape from the diversity.
Yeah, for that I can say that when one realizes that one is his consciousness, in reality, in your experiential understanding, your consciousness, you saw the truth, then this very consciousness is using this mind and the body, and the mind particularly has so many diversities, right? So it's looking through that mind, the world outside as itself, oneness only. Even though mind has the diversity,
yes.
Only in ignorance this diversity is taken as a real, like every object the mind has is taken as a real, and then there is a possibility of attachment and all the jealousy and anger and all those things is that contamination, like you said. It's a contamination in terms of the real experience of anger and all that.
Yes.
So, but when the understanding is that this diversity in itself is to be enjoyed as me, as I. It is I. The God is looking through the mind as it himself or herself.
Yes. So that is
standing alone to me.
Yes. So now if we were to use the Sanskrit language, Sat, Chit, Ananda, the three words, Sat is existence or being. That it's the being, existence in all of its glory. The existence of the spirit, if you want to say, the existence of the mind, the diversity outside, plurality, the world of names and forms, all of that is part of Sat.
It's part of Sat.
It's part of Sat. It's isness, it's existence itself.
Isness. Because first and fundamental experience, when your eye falls on anything outside, is the isness, that a tree is, the dog is, the house is. Yeah. That's the most correct. And then the mind steps in and names.
Yes, and I think that's where that self-mastery part really comes in, that the mind can step in functionally in terms of interacting with the plural world because that is where the generation of names and forms is required. I mean, the form is seen, is there, but then the name that is associated with it has a functional use, as an interactional use. It is not really to name different objects or the contents of the mind, psychological content. The naming is not for the purpose of disconnecting with,
or dividing,
or dividing with the fullness of reality. Right? What do you say about that?
Right. That is exactly the way I see, is that if I may say something, like outside world to me is a God's world. Why it is? Because it's first of all, it's a isness only, and then nothing outside that tells that. Dog doesn't tell I'm different than the tree. Tree doesn't tell I'm different than the water. Water doesn't tell I'm different than the mountain. Mountain doesn't. All those things are there, right? They don't have any say. So there is a oneness in God's world already. In our understanding, when we see experientially that all we experience is the isness, and this isness also is not all separate objects, because separate objects are arising out of this isness as of names and the forms. But otherwise, it's all one. So that experience is so important. But what we do is to carve out our world and put it in the mind with these names and the forms considered real. Not the diversity gets lost in its proper use of diversity, knowing that they are all me is different than considering them as all separate and for my consumption only. So that there is a difference when we see the truth that this diversity is carved out and put it in our mind, because the mind is always limited. God's word is infinite, but out of that we carve out, put it in the mind, and the only thing we have to realize that it's also a God's word. We don't realize, then we will take all this separate as a real.
Yes, that's very interesting, and it's worth looking into that in much depth, obviously, because part of what we're trying to do in the Angel Wing program is to encourage people to reflect, to meditate, to take steps for self-improvement, etc. Okay.
Right.
So what you are suggesting here is that the diverse experiences of life, the diverse interactions of life, whatever they are, whatever they may be, they can be seen for what they are as they are,
Right.
rather than making a judgment about it and getting entangled in the judgment. That is true awareness. What do you say about that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that when we see the diversity, we think that this diversity is really separate objects. Then and I also am a separate object, like one of them only. So this diversity is to be seen as underneath the diversity is only unity. And that comes with this understanding and this looking at this experience of outside. Like Sufi always tells that wherever my eyes fall, there is the face of God. Now that means that diversity is also God. Namarupa also is really a stand on this unity, Sat, on the Sat. This Sat is manifesting as the names and forms. And this Sat is experienced only with the Chit, which is consciousness. That's my reality. My reality is looking at this Sat. And that Sat experienced only as Chit, whatever the consciousness is giving us the experience, is the real experience. The Sat has no independence. It doesn't have any say in what it is. So that's the most important thing I have learned, is that Advaita means only consciousness can give us the truth about what it is.
Yes. So could we say then that the diverse world of names, forms, people, places, objects, animals, everything, galaxies, whatever, everything that is in our perception, through microscopes, telescopes, in every possible way, all of that is the diversity. It's within the human perception. Now, to lose sight of the unity and then to see the diversity while losing sight of the unity is then the root of every form of suffering.
Yeah.
Would you agree on that?
I agree on that, because then only the possibility of contamination, like I will have a problem with the other person or other thing in the nature. All those things will have only when I consider them as a real and not see the unity underneath, without which they cannot even manifest as a diverse thing.
Yes, very, very much so. And the actual perception of the oneness or the existence of the oneness, which is just existence itself, that everything just exists. So if when we are in tune or in sync, when the mind is in sync with just isness, oneness, being, then the diversity, of course, still exists, but that diversity is seen as another manifestation or as a further extension of that oneness.
It is,
right?
We don't have any proof that the things that we see and know experientially only as an isness underneath all the diverse forms, that understanding itself will prevent all this contamination that we have in terms of getting attached to some object and hating some and loving some, all for ourselves only. That vanishes when you see that, because
yes, exactly.
So this consciousness is one reality, wholeness. There is no consciousness, doesn't have any border or anything, right? That we can see that consciousness, because it's not a mind's object. Mind cannot catch consciousness. Consciousness can come to the mind and help, but mind, I cannot objectify the consciousness as much as I objectify the diversity. But even that diversity is one unique existence. That is also is the proof, because we see that very clearly. The fundamental experience of existence outside separate objects is nothing but the isness.
Right. Yes, that's right. So in our actual life, in our day-to-day life, moment-to-moment life, this that you are expressing, that we are examining together, but these are
together, yes,
that we're doing it together. But this is this is your presentation, so I'm trying not to talk too much, but I want to try to have a little conversation at the same time, because I think that'll be helpful.
I'm really thankful to you.
No, it's very, very powerful and very interesting that there is absolute practicality in this. That it is totally applicable and practical, this thing that you are describing, this state of work, living in the world of names and forms, the functionality of it, the non-entanglement of it, which is a word that I like to use quite often. And at the same time, there is a realization of existence, that we exist, and that itself is a great great wonder. The existence itself is a great wonder.
Great wonder, yes.
Right. So there's a quotation from Nisargadatta Maharaj. You may have you're familiar with him. Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Right. I'm very fond of him also. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a very interesting quotation, and this kind of maybe takes it puts the same thing that we're talking about, just using different language. So the quotation is like this: self-realization definitely comes first. The mind cannot go beyond itself by itself. It must explode.
Yeah.
There's a similar idea in J. Krishnamurti's ideas about an explosion from within. You know, and when I hear that, that means that the dualities that the mind is stuck in has ended.
Say that again.
So the mind that is stuck in dualities, in all the polarities and the pairs of opposites, when that stops, when the mind is no longer trapped in that vortex, there is this explosion of intelligence. What do you say? What do you say?
Yeah, that is very correct. Except that I would say that the mind will be free when this sense of me derived from the mind, who is taking away all mind's knowledge and everything, as if it is separately knowing it. In other words, it separates, it manipulates the mind when this separate existence is taken as a real. When that drops away, in the sense that it is understood that this is not really at the level, true. It's not true. How can the thought can control, and how can the thought be our reality? Reality has to be permanent something. And we find this consciousness as ever present. The most important thing about one wants to learn is to see that this awareness or a consciousness is ever present in all experiences of the mind. So I'm not going to tell in detail right now, but that has to be seen. And when you see that, then all of a sudden this mind becomes a beautiful instrument to enjoy, celebrate the life, because then there is nothing that it will take it as a real or anything. It's only this separate thing that is robbing the mind and usurping the mind based all the knowledge is like itself, real itself.
Yes.
When that goes down in the sense that it becomes a tool of the mind, then the mind has a tremendous use and applications, and the beautiful thing, this mind in itself.
Yes, so there is actual freedom of energy. Energy gets freed, which was being locked up or being damaged by the pairs of opposites. The swinging.
Right, yeah, pair of opposites.
Yeah. Pairs of opposites is what tears the mind. Is fragmentation effect.
Yeah.
That's the fragmentation that, what is it that is fragmented? When we say mind is fragmented, it means that the energies within the mind are also fragmented. Obviously.
Pairs of opposite can only exist in the mind.
Exactly. So once the pairs of opposites, even though the diversity is perceived, the mind is not functioning in a reactive manner as the pairs of opposites anymore. So the function of the mind still sees the diversity, experiences diversity, but there's a great stillness amidst that diversity.
I can tell something about that I have understood about these pairs of opposite and the mind, and is that whenever there is a trouble is felt on the part of this I, when I suffer, it's the I that is suffering, right? That I take as a real suffering to me. The sense of separate I, that mind-based, derived from the mind, is that when there is some adversity hits this, and this I thinks that it hit me. So immediately, in the absence of all this inquiry and everything, immediately it focuses opposite of happiness. If it is adverse, then it says, I have to be free from that. The opposite gets projected, by that.
Right, exactly.
If you stay with it, like Krishnamurti always says, you stay with it, then you find the real cause, then there is no need of opposite.
Exactly.
In other words, if I understand that this adversity is really happening to the I, which is not an existence entity, it's a thought about the adversity is taken real as happening to I, which is not real, other than the thought. So then, if we once understood, then there won't be any projection to free. Immediately, I want to be free. If I have a problem, I want to be free, and not understand who has the problem.
So we are at 1 hour. I just want to make one more comment here, and then get your thoughts. And that is, here's another interesting point that was made by Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he stated, the innermost light shining peacefully and timelessly in the heart is the real Guru. All others merely show the way. So the real Guru is the innermost light that shines peacefully and timelessly beyond time.
Yes.
That is the real Guru. And all other teachers, gurus, are showing the way to this.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that is very correct. These other teachers, they just point out as to where we should look and find the truth.
Yes. But the actual truth is only found by yourself, within yourself. There's no other place you're going to find it anyway.
Which is the consciousness itself is the actual Guru.
Yes, and also the fact that we experience diversity. Who is it that is experiencing diversity? I have to say, well, I'm experiencing this world. If I'm not there, is the world there or not? What difference does it make?
And also, one other thing, if I may add, that when we truly discover who we really are, it's consciousness that discovers himself as that was in ignorantly assuming this I as a
yes.
consciousness itself, this light itself. So in a way, that is a Guru, right?
Yes, definitely.
It's a cognition. It's a cognition-based real experience,
See that innermost.
You are already there, whether you know it or not.
Consciousness
is in ignorance. It doesn't know. So all it has to do is to know.
Yes.
Right?
Just to realize.
That is what I think tells me that it's like a Guru also. It led himself from the ignorance to the reality.
Yes, because that innermost light.
Innermost.
And again, these are words, so these descriptions are not the actual thing. Descriptions are never to describe, but they're other ways of putting it. Whatever the actual reality is, these descriptions are on the surface. Even the conversation you and I are having, this is on the surface. Okay, but what it is referring to, what it is trying to get to, is the real thing, and that reality, the described, the actual reality of who am I, what is existence, consciousness, truth, bliss, ananda, all of that actual reality is a matter of discovery by taking an internal journey through inquiry. And that's where this realization of the pairs of opposites, realization of the entanglements of the mind, realization of all the different kinds of divisiveness that is created. When we realize all of that and then de-identify, the de-identification process. So in Angel Wing, we are trying to present a de-identification process. Although, just as you're saying, living with the diversity, but not to get wrapped up in a limited way with that diversity. So any closing comments you want to make?
Yeah, the one I would like to tell you is that the de-identification is not something that somebody has to do.
Yeah.
Because it's totally an understanding that as much as this identification with mind and the body, giving a separate I, is a thought based, but it still is still the truth of that, knowing the truth of that and its falsity as a truth, then that very I becomes the tool of the mind and the body.
Yes.
So it is not like it will go away.
Right.
Exactly. Live in the dual world. So that this identification is a total understanding of seeing the anatomy of this separate I and its use, because you cannot get rid of that when you have to live with the practical world.
Right, exactly.
That this identification is in that sense. It's not something that there is a process, that time-bound process that you do.
Right.
That's
right,
all I
right.
want to add.
Exactly. It's an awareness. It's a perception. Yeah. Yes. Very, very interesting. Okay, so we will stop here for today. We'll pick it up.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. And let me stop the recording here, and we'll pick it up next time.
Yeah.
One moment here.